Hi guys, and welcome to Is It Worth It for the Type 3 Chinokai, the Tier 5 Japanese Premium Medium Tank. It's available from the tech tree for 1500 gold, or from the gift shop. It's not a very expensive tank, but then not a lot of the low tier premiums are. So let's talk about the history of the tank. Well, this is a Chinokai, and the Kai designation on Japanese tanks basically means an upgrade. So this is the upgrade of the Chinu, the Tier 5 tank in-game. But again, talking real life, the Chinokai was a prototype. There was only one built in 1945, and the reason it was a Chinokai is because it had an upgraded suspension over the Chinu. The other thing the tank was upgraded with was, over the Chinu, was the gun. The 75 centimeter Type 5 gun was actually the gun from the Cheeto. So it was a Chinu with upgraded suspension and a Cheeto's gun, hence Chinokai. But only one was built, and it was a prototype. So I'm going to start the review with a little bit of a disclaimer. If you watch my stream, if you've watched previous videos, you'll probably have got the impression that I don't like Japanese tanks very much. And it's true. I'm up to Tier 7 on the Japanese lines, I'm playing the Chiri at the moment, and I'm not a fan of Japanese tanks. Therefore, on those rare occasions where I do hop into the Chinokai and play it, I'm quite negative. But that's not because of the tank. That is because I don't like Japanese tanks. I am 100% aware that there are players out there who can do really well in Japanese tanks, but I just don't like the playstyle. I just don't seem to do as well in Japanese tanks as I do in other tanks, and I'm not going to let that color my review. The question I'm asking is the Chinokai a decent premium tank? And regardless of whether or not I like playing it or I like playing Japanese tanks, it's not going to color my opinion. So let's get going. Now, before I compare the Chinokai to its Tier 5 premium medium tank competitors, I am going to very quickly compare it against the actual Chinu in-game, because this is going to be very important. So I'm using What Tank Compare, really good site if you haven't used it before, and I'm comparing the Type 3 Chinokai versus the Type 3 Chinu. So they're both here, they're both medium tanks, and they're both on the Japanese line. One is in game, one's available for gold, and top values on both tanks. And we're just going to move down, and as you can see, they have the same matchmaking. So the Chinokai does not actually receive special matchmaking. It receives the same matchmaking as the Chinu in-game. We'll take a look at the hit points, and you'll see that the hit points are identical at 480. The signal range on the Chinokai is slightly worse. The Chinu's is better. The speed limit's the same. Reverse speed is the same. The weight is similar. The load limit is similar. The crew layout is similar. The armor is quite similar. The hull armor is identical on both tanks, but because the Chinokai is using the Cheeto's gun, it does get a slightly different upgraded turret. So it gets 25 millimeters of extra frontal armor on the turret, 50 millimeters of side armor, and 50 millimeters of rear armor. So the turret on the Chinokai is better than the upgraded Chinu in-game, but it's not that much better. It's a Tier 5 medium tank, and most Tier 5s, 6s and 7s, because it doesn't get special matchmaking, will easily be able to pen the turret on the Chinu or the Chinokai. It makes very little difference between the two tanks. More differences are evident when we take a look at the engine. We only have 240 horsepower on the Chinokai compared to 300 on the final engine on the Chinu. So basically the horsepower to weight ratio is a lot worse, which means the tank accelerates a lot worse. The traverse speed is better, but because of the lower engine power, it doesn't traverse quite as well as these stats would have you believe. The max climb angle, so it's poor on both tanks. Neither of these tanks like climbing hills. The terrain resistance is identical. The fire chance per engine shots is identical. The view range on both tanks is the same at 350 meters, which is not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. And a tier 5 medium with 350 meters view range, it can be bumped with crew skills, with equipment. So the view range on either the Chinu or the Chinokai is pretty good, assuming you're using binocs or coated optics. The final gun on the Chi-Nu is actually the Cheetos gun, so basically both tanks have the same final gun. As you can see, the damage, penetration, shell price, shell speed, damage per minute are all identical. It's exactly the same gun. It's got the same rate of fire, same reload, same accuracy, same aim time. Slight difference in gun depression. The Chi-Nu-Kai has 7 degrees of gun depression, which is okay, but the Chi-Nu, the Tier 5, actually has 10 degrees of gun depression. So in that regards, the in-game tank is a little bit better. They have the same amount of ammunition. They actually have the same camo value, even though it's not included here. But as you can see, battle performance according to VB Addict, the Chi-Nu-Kai probably does a little bit better, more because it's a premium tank and more experienced players play the tank, but to all intents and purposes the Chi-Nu-Kai and the Chi-Nu are identical. The Chi-Nu-Kai is a little bit slower, but it has slightly better turret armor, but other than that the two tanks are identical. So what I'm saying is the Chi-Nu-Kai is pretty much identical in playstyle and in stats to the in-game Chi-Nu. It sees the same tanks, it sees the same matchmaking, and the style of play between the two tanks is almost identical. So therefore, if I didn't like playing the Chi-Nu, I'm probably not going to like playing the Chi-Nu-Kai. And that is basically where my opinion on the Chi-Nu-Kai lies. I don't like the Japanese tanks, and therefore, the Chi-Nu-Kai doesn't play any differently, and I don't really enjoy playing the tank. However, that's not to say it's not a good premium tank. Now, let's compare this tank against all its other Tier 5 premium medium competitors. And there are a lot of competitors. The Chi-Nu-Kai is up against the T25 and the PZ4 Hydrostat, the two Tier 5 German premium medium tanks. It's also up against the American Tier 5, the Ram 2, the Matilda Black Prince from the British line, and the Matilda 4 from the Lend-Lease program to the Russians. So it does have a lot of competition, and we're going to take a look at the hit points, and you'll see that it has 480 hit points, which is crap compared to all the other premium medium tanks at Tier 5. The Chi-Nu-Kai is easily the worst. The average seems to be just around 600. The T25, Ram 2, and the Matilda Black Prince and the Matilda 4 all get 610 hit points. That seems to be the standard. The PZ4 Hydrostat is a little bit lower at 550, but the Chi-Nu-Kai is even worse. It's 480. So it gets incredibly shafted when it comes to hit points, and it really hurts because the Chi-Nu-Kai doesn't have a lot of armor, as we're about to come to now, so very low hit points compared to any of the other Tier 5 premium medium tanks, and not much armor. The weight limit makes it a very light tank. It comes in for me at around 22 tons, which makes it one of the lightest tanks. All the other medium tanks are heavier, except for the T25, and that's only about a ton lighter, so it's a very light tank. But it doesn't have a lot of engine power. Usually when you see a light tank, due to the fact it doesn't have much armor, it's quite quick, but the Chi-Nu-Kai doesn't have a lot of engine power. It only has 240 horsepower, and that doesn't compare very favorably to any of the other tanks. Most of the others are significantly better. Only the Matilda Black Prince is worse at 190, but all the other tanks have more engine power. So even though it's a light tank, it doesn't have the engine to take advantage of that, and that means its speed limit is only 39 kilometers an hour. So it's okay. It's not a slow tank, but remember, it's a medium tank, and medium tanks usually depend on their speed. They usually depend on their mobility, and that's one of the reasons I just don't like Japanese tanks that much, because they don't have that speed, they don't have that maneuverability, and you need to play a lot of Japanese tanks very passively. You can see that the speed limit is not slow, but it's significantly worse than the T25, which is my favorite Tier 5 premium tank. but it does compare favorably to all the others. The Ram 2 has a very similar speed. The PZ4 Hydrostat is a little bit faster, but it is faster than either of the Matildas. The Black Prince and the Matilda 4 are much slower. The traverse speed is pretty good at 38 degrees per second, but again, compared to the other medium tanks, it's not that much better. It's better than the T25, but the others are very similar. So let's talk about this armor. It's a very lightly armored tank, as most Japanese tanks are, but it does compare quite favorably to most of the other tanks. The hull armor is the same hull armor on the Chinu, and it's only got 50mm of frontal armor, 25 on the side and 20 at the rear. However, it's very flat, and even though on paper the armor is very similar to maybe the T25's, the T25's armor is sloped, so it takes guns of higher penetration to be able to penetrate it. And the Chinu doesn't benefit from that. Most tanks that shoot at this tank will actually penetrate. When we compare it to the other tanks, there are some strange beasts in here. The Matilda Black Prince and the Matilda 4 on paper are actually much better armored hull-wise. The PZ4 Hydrostat isn't well armored, and it probably is the best comparison to the Chinukai. Anything that hits either of these two tanks is going to penetrate and is going to do damage. The turret armor makes the Chinukai a little bit different. The turret armor is actually okay, and with 7 degrees of gun depression, you can kind of use this tank hull down, but remember, 75mm isn't a lot when you're going to be facing up against tier 6 and tier 7 guns. So yeah, even though the turret armor is okay in comparison to the other tanks, it's still not great. It compares favorably to the Black Prince and the Matilda 4. Similar frontal turret armor. Side turret armor on these two tanks is better, as is the rear, but it is better than the turret on the T25 and the PZ4 Hydrostat. So I can't really be critical of the Chinukai because of its armor. It does compare quite favorably to all the other tier 5 premium medium tanks. The problem with this armor is the hit points. Because the hit points are so shockingly bad on this tank, HE really messes you up. So the armor is pretty terrible on this tank. I've already picked up 2 kills on Fjords, and I'm about to flank this AT2, and this is one of the few tanks in the game where the sluggish engine will actually allow you to get behind an AT2. But remember, I only have 25 degrees of side armor and 50 degrees of frontal armor, and there's a SAU 40. That was a tier 4 derp gun, a tier 4 tank doing 377 HE damage to the front of the Chinukai. Tanks firing HE, tanks with derp guns, even lower tier derp guns are going to absolutely wreck the Chinukai. And that crap armor and low hit point pool really means Artie loves shooting at these tanks. So I think I'm safe from Artie. And there we go. Only 480 hit points, no armor. Artie really enjoys shooting Japanese tanks, and the Chinukai is absolutely no difference. Moving on, we're going to talk about the gun in a moment, but we'll take a look at the view range. The view range on the tank is pretty good. It is much better than the T25, the Hydrostat, or the Ram 2, and is similar to the Matildas. So the view range is pretty good. When you use binocs and a pretty well-trained crew, the Chinukai actually does have decent view range, and it can be used as a sniper. In fact, not only can it be used as a sniper, it probably should be used as a sniper in most situations. The signal range, however, is not so good. Compared to all the other premium tanks, the signal range is terrible. All of the other tanks have much better signal range, and this is another one of these tanks where on large battlefields you're going to be falling out of range of your friendly tanks. There's going to be things happening on the other side of the map, and you're not going to be aware of them because your signal range is just not good enough. So we're going to talk about this gun. It comes with a 75cm Type 5, and this is the Cheetos gun. This is why this tank gets the designation Kai over the standard Chi-Nu in-game. So it has better suspension and a gun from the Cheeto. And this is the gun from the Cheeto. Now this is not the upgraded gun, this is a stock gun, but you can see that these two guns are absolutely identical. It's the same gun, but this one's from the Cheeto stock, and this is from the Chi-Nu-Kai. So no need to talk about it anymore. So it's basically the stock Cheeto gun, and the stock Cheeto gun is actually okay. It's not bad, and you can use it to unlock the second gun on the Cheeto without too much pain. So we've got a 75mm with a rate of fire of 12 rounds a minute, which is pretty good. We have average penetration of 124, which is okay. Compared to the other tier 5 premium tanks, it's actually okay. The alpha damage of 125 again is okay. So the DPM on this tank isn't bad. It compares favorably to almost all the other tier 5 medium tanks. The accuracy is not great, but again, it's not bad, and the aim time is not great, but it's not bad at 2.3. In fact, it's okay. I mean, the gun is not bad on this tank, and the gun is one of its best features. So this is one of these tanks where you don't actually have to fire a lot of premium. Depending on the tanks on the enemy team, if it's a tier 5 game, fantastic. You're going to be able to penetrate almost every single tank on the enemy team without any problems. Even if it's a tier 6 game, you're going to be able to penetrate most of the enemy tanks without any problems, without having to use premium. In a tier 7 game, again, I don't tend to use a lot of premium on this tank. I know I have 20 premium shells loaded, but I very rarely get to use them, even against tier 7s. It's only when you come up against some tier 7 TDs or maybe some tier 7 heavies where they're at distance or angled that maybe you have to switch up to the premium ammo. But this tank is a moneymaker. The ammo is pretty cheap, and you don't have to fire a lot of premium, and that makes it a good tank in my opinion. People buy a premium tank because A, they want to train crews, and B, because they want to make extra credits. And some tanks, unfortunately, even though they're premium tanks, have guns that are so bad you end up having to fire a lot of premium and you don't make as many credits with them. The Chi-Nu-Kai is not one of those tanks. You can spam gold, there's no problem spamming gold, you'll probably still make a little bit of a profit, but not guaranteed. But it's one of those tanks with a decent gun where you don't have to spam gold, only in special situations, and as a result, it does actually make money. So let's see this gun in action, and maybe a little bit of the engine power as well. We are here on Sand River. It's a 64%er, and it's a tier 6 game. However, there are only 4 tier 6s on the enemy team. However, the enemy team do have 3 RT, and 2 of them are FV304s, and I'm in a Chi-Nu-Kai. So no matter how good the matchup is, when that sort of matchup happens and there are a lot of RT on the enemy team, you really need to be careful in this tank. So 64%er, I do want to be a little bit aggressive, but that's so difficult to do in a tank like the Chi-Nu-Kai. But I'm going to try and play my tanks to its strength, or my tank to its strengths. I'm going to be using its gun, and I'm going to be using its view range. So the tank accelerates okay, but I'm only doing about 37 kilometers an hour. You only have a 38 kilometer an hour top speed limit, and it struggles. It's definitely not a fast medium tank, and as soon as you hit a slope, there we go. Look at the engine speed. We've dropped down to 8 kilometers an hour. You really do not want to use this tank on hills. The engine power just is so bad. Struggling 4 kilometers an hour trying to get up that little slope. But I want to use my view range, I want to put my binocs into use, and I want to try and spot RT. So someone has spotted the KV2, don't know if whether it was me or whether it was the Cromwell. But he's behind a bush. So we could just open up and the side of a KV2, absolutely no problems. Bounce on his rear, the shot goes a little bit high. Trying to track him. You see the rate of fire, the aim time. There we go, now we've tracked him. The gun is pretty good, it is pretty accurate. Shell velocity isn't great, it does take a little bit of time for the shell to reach the target. So there's that SAU 40. and pre-aim, get a nice hit in. Enemy Chinokai, but I decide that the Sao 40 is a better target. Get another shot in, but he was turning to face me, and I'm sure I've been spotted. I don't have Sixth Sense. As you can see, I haven't played enough games in this tank to get Sixth Sense on it yet. But yeah, I'm still spotted, but I'm wondering if the enemy team are shooting blind. And oh, there's a T-49 down there as well, so I'm taking lots of hits, and I've lost quite a lot of my hit points, so something is still spotting me. The tanks below me had dropped off the radar, so I assumed I had dropped off the radar too, but yeah. Obviously not. There's something down here that was able to spot me without spotting them. So, South 40, for a moment I thought he was behind the church, but nope. And okay, so pretty good aim time, but even the aim time wasn't great there. But we're up to almost 800 damage so far. I did take a few hits that I really shouldn't have. And just shows how important Sixth Sense is. If I'd had Sixth Sense, I wouldn't have taken those hits. But every shot that's been fired at me has penned so far. The armor really is crap on this tank, but I can't blame the tank. It's crap on every Japanese tank. So I'm taking a risk. We've moved up. There's a T-40 here. And I thought he was behind a rock, but nope, he's still in the open, and we're still able to hit him. So that was a shot at nearly 300 meters, and we were able to pen him. There's an M3 Lee here, and now the shot is going high. There we go. Just had to aim a little bit carefully. So our team have been aggressive as predicted at the start of this game. They've pushed around, they're moving in towards the enemy arty. This T-49 is a threat. And as you can see, the engine, is not bad. When it's on flat ground, you can get up to that 38 kilometers an hour. But when you do start going uphill, you tend to drop speed quite a lot. So I don't have much to shoot at this T-49. He's moving back and forward, he's staying arty safe, he's doing quite well, and again he stops. Yeah, no chance. Okay, so 3 enemy tanks left. Chinokai, okay. Didn't see him, missed possibly a chance to get a shot in on him. Just 2 FV304s left, and now you're going to see the gun being accurate at its best. So there's one of them. Not much to aim at, so I'm pre-aimed where he's going to come around the corner. And we get a nice shot in. Shot goes exactly where I wanted it. The other FV is coming over the hill. And shot goes exactly where I wanted it to. The accuracy, the aim time, the penetration, the alpha damage, it's all good. This tank has a pretty good gun. So it may not have been the most exciting of gameplays, but it did demonstrate the tank's view range, it did demonstrate the tank's gun, and I was playing it rather passively. I was using my view range to get some early spots, and I was just putting that gun into use. It was still good enough to finish first with 820 XP, significantly better than the rest of my team, even though it was a raffle stomp, and I managed to do 1080 damage relatively quickly with 3 kills. And this is where the stats count. I fired 14. Now some of them were long shots and missed due to tanks moving in the distance, but I did manage to hit 11 and I did manage to penetrate 10. And that was without any premium ammo. So the alpha damage and the rate of fire on the gun is good. The accuracy and aim time are pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. And it's just a decent gun, and that's what makes the Chinokai a decent tank in my opinion. If it was a lot like some of the other tier 5 premium medium tanks where you end up having to fire a lot of premium, then I wouldn't be as enthusiastic about this tank. But the gun is pretty good. I spotted 3. Damaged 6, destroyed 3, so the view range is again good, and I did 608 spotting damage. So playing the tank relatively passively, playing it as a support tank on the second line, using your view range when you can, and keeping that gun firing means you will have some good games in the Chinokai. But it's not one of these tanks you're going to be carrying games in. It's not a tank you want to be in when your team collapses and you're the last one standing. So let's talk about the crew. Well, it's got a decent crew layout. In fact, it's more than decent. It is perfect. You've got a commander, gunner, driver, radio operator, and loader. So this is a perfect crew trainer for Japanese tanks. All the positions are covered, and you can use the Chinokai to train up new crews or to train existing crews without any problems. So crew training, it's very, very good. So let's talk about equipment. There are quite a few equipment choices and we're just going to speed down through them. A toolbox, once again, a toolbox is okay on any tank, assuming A, you have a toolbox in your garage because it's free to demount and mount on tanks, and you have a free equipment slot. So toolbox is okay, but it wouldn't be a first choice. A gun laying drive to increase your aiming speed. 2.3 milliseconds aiming speed on this gun is fine. It works just fine. I've had no problems with the aim time on the tank at all, so I haven't had any haven't had any reason to even think about putting a gun laying drive on. Coated optics is a viable choice. It is a medium tank, however, because you're very, very lightly armored, you don't have the hit points, you really, really don't want to be on the front line, and as a result you end up playing this as a support tank and sniping with it a lot, and I think that the Binocs are a better choice over the coated optics for that reason. But maybe you could put both on. I mean, it's completely up to your call. Gun rammer is always a decent choice if you can get away with it. Plus 10% to loading time basically means, or minus 10 to loading time basically means plus 10 to your DPM. So 10% extra DPM is always good on pretty much any tank. Medium spall liner. Again, this tank is very lightly armored. HE does mess you up, but you just don't have the hit points. Only 480 hit points. So if this tank is getting shot at, I really don't think a medium spall liner is going to help you. Wet ammo rack. I don't get ammo racked in this tank often enough to actually warrant spending 200,000 credits on wet ammo racks. Vents, again, plus 5% to all crew skills. Because the view range is pretty good, basically having vents on the tank gets me up to 357 from the 350. So basically 5% better in every way is always a good equipment choice. Camo net is also a viable choice if you can't afford other equipment on this tank and you are going to be using it as a sniper. Binocs, camo net, maybe vents or a gun rammer, perfectly viable choice. So there's a few ways you can kit out this tank. This is just the way I did it, but as I say, if you want to put maybe a gun rammer, camo net and Binocs on the tank and use it as a pure sniper, you can. So it is time for the overview game, a game where I try and show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one game. It may not be the best game, it may not be the best gameplay, but it pretty much sums up what I've been talking about with regards to the tank throughout the review. We are here on Westfield and it is a 46%er, but it's a tier 5 game and that's a really, really nice matchup for the Chinokai. But once again, even though I am top tier, the Chinokai is not a tank you want to be aggressive in. If you try to be aggressive in this tank, you are going to get your butt kicked. You don't have the armor and you don't have the hit points. So once again, I'm going to be trying to put my view range and my gun in action, but I don't want to be on the front line. So let's just get going. So I've just glanced to my left and I've noticed we've got lots of tanks heading up to E0, and that's fine by me. I'm hoping that they are going to be able to spot the enemy mediums coming down the 9-0 lines, and I'm going to be able to get flanking shots. In the meantime, I'm hoping I'm going to be able to spot tanks coming up through the middle and maybe support the tanks north. But as you can see, the tank is slow. It is struggling over this ground, and as soon as I hit the rise, my speed drops off. Look how painfully slow this supposedly medium tank is. So first spot has happened, not mine. T49 has spotted a PZ-1C. Now I should point out, whoops, come on, a little bit of lag. Missed that shot. I was actually eating while playing this game. Hence me reversing into rocks and missing my shots. So I did have my hands full, but we do still manage to get one shot in. I'm waiting for this PZ-1C to come back out, but he gets taken out. So, alright. So I've stopped eating, I've put my food down, and I'm continuing to advance. I was not expecting to run into any tanks so soon, but yeah, they caught me unawares. So now I've got both hands on the keyboard again, and I'm accelerating painfully slowly. But the reason I came up to this position is this very reason. I bounce on the side of the T-34, but I do hit him. So again, we continue to go to work. He's been tracked, and I'm still putting shots in. So I'm up to almost 400 damage, and the game is just getting started. But again, look how slow this tank is. It just does not have the engine power. It really, really struggles as a medium tank. So, even though I've got 7 degrees of gun depression, I can't get a shot on the PZ-4H. I have to adjust my position. And there's kill number 1. And again, I'm falling back just in case I was spotted, but nothing is firing at me, so I think it's safe. And okay, alright, I guess it wasn't as safe as I thought it was. So Su-85B, no problems putting a shot into me. And already I've lost a third of my hit points, just shot once by a lower tier tank. The hit points really do hurt this tank. So team have advanced, and again, long distance shot. I'm able to put one into that PZ-38T, and again, Su-85B, he's on the move. A little bit more of a difficult shot. There's an A-20. Oh, that was a bad shot by me. Can't blame the gun for that one. But again, I'm not being on the front line. There's a Covenanter just above me. We do have the gun depression. So that's kill number 2, and this Su-85B is still down here. And the accuracy is good enough. The rate of fire is good enough. The aim time is good enough to pick up kill number 3. But again, going up this slope, this tank is just so bad. 14 kilometers an hour, trying to get shots on this PZ-SFL. Do have the gun depression, but he dies before I can get a shot in. And now I want to move up and try and start working on this KV-1, but a Matilda has appeared, and he has no problems penning me. 75 millimeters of turret armor. I know from experience in an earlier game that isn't in this review that basically I came across a pair of Matildas while I was in a really strong hull down position, and they just tore me apart. So backed away really quickly. I do not want to deal with that Matilda. He will have no problems penning me, and his rate of fire is much better than mine. So T-49 on the move. Difficult shot. Missed that one. Didn't have much to aim at. And of course hit with no damage. So I can use, finally, a little bit of maneuverability going downhill to get some speed. Take him out for kill number 4. 3 enemy tanks on the enemy team. But again, look how slow this tank is. So you cannot play this tank actively. You cannot play it aggressively. But if this is a style of play you like, then it's a good tank. I mean, I don't think it's any better than the Chinook in-game. And if you are thinking about a Chinook Kai, I do recommend playing a lot of games in the Chinook. And if you can do well in the Chinook, you're going to do well in the Chinook Kai. To all intents and purposes, it's the same tank. So I'm pre-aimed. I know that this A-20 is here. I don't have shots on the KV-1. I can tell that from the minimap. So I'm going for a blind shot where I think the A-20 might be hiding. We've got tanks advancing. Oh, there he is. I was close. I almost guessed the right bush, but there we go. Kill number 5. And 1136 damage, just a Martyr 2 left, but I'm not going to get shots on him. But yeah, when you play this tank to its strengths, you can do quite well, but it's a tank that you really are more team dependent on. If your team sucks and collapses, then the Chinokai is not a tank you want to be in, because this tank doesn't really deal well with multiple opponents at the same time. However, if your team are okay and you can get into a position where you can keep this gun singing, it's actually not a bad tank. So once again, it was a first class with high caliber thrown in. But again, I finished top on XP with 828, 1136 damage this time and 5 kills. So the tank performs. It is a decent tank when you play it to its strengths, but its playstyle may not suit anyone. And as I say, it is a little bit team dependent, because if your team collapses and you're left alone against multiple enemy tanks where you can't engage them one at a time, it's a very difficult tank to win games in. Okay, to sum up, the Chinokai, is it worth 1500 gold? Well, it's got a lot of negatives, but it does have some positives. It's only got 480 hit points, which is so bad. I really don't understand why the hit points are so low. It basically is a Chinu. It plays identical to the tank in-game. There's almost no difference between the two tanks. It's a slower version of the in-game tank with slightly better turret armor and slightly worse gun depression. So really, you're not missing out on anything by not owning the Chinokai. You can pretty much experience Chinokai gameplay by buying the tier 5 Chinu in-game, but the hit points are shockingly bad compared to the other tier 5 premium medium tanks. It's quite slow, it is quite sluggish, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but it is a big target. The Chinokai is bigger than most heavy tanks of its own tier, so it is a big target with absolutely no armor. It has low engine power, so it is quite slow, it is quite sluggish, and again, with that low armor, you do not want to be using it as a traditional medium tank. You want to stay back, you want to be a support tank, you want to snipe, and you want to flank when you can to try and hit enemy tanks in their weak spots, but it's not always an easy proposition in a Chinokai. Its armor isn't good. It does have okay turret armor for a medium tank, and it can go hull down. It does have 7 degrees of gun depression, and the gun is pretty good on it. But again, it doesn't have special matchmaking, so 75mm of frontal turret armor isn't going to help you that much when you're up against a lot of tier 6 and a lot of tier 7 tanks. The view range is pretty good, and the signal range is pretty bad. So all of that added up makes the Chinokai Mr. Average. I mean, it's better in some ways than a lot of other tanks, and it's a lot worse in some ways than a lot of other tanks. I don't understand the hit points. I really don't, and I don't see why the other tier 5 premium medium tanks can get an average of about 610 hit points and the Chinokai gets shafted so badly. If this tank had 610 hit points, I would be recommending this a lot more, but it doesn't. It can't use its hit points to tank damage, a lot like the other medium tanks do, and because of that light armor, HE really messes you up. So unlike the other tanks that can take 2, maybe even 3 hits before going down, the Chinokai quite often only takes 1 or 2 at most. So you really can't take hits in this tank, and you have to play it so passively. But being objective, even though I don't like playing Japanese tanks, you've got to ask yourself, well, what do I want from a premium tank? Do I want to earn credits? Yes, obviously. That's why I'm buying a premium tank. So, will the Chinokai earn you credits? Yes. Yeah, the gun on it is pretty good, especially for its tier. You don't have to fire that much premium ammo, and the repair costs are okay. So, you will make money in this tank. The other reason you might want a premium tank is to train crews, and does the Chinokai make a good crew trainer? Yes, it's got a very good crew layout. It is perfect for training or doubling up on training for Japanese crews. And I am perfectly aware that the Chinokai can be played very well. I have seen players get 8, 9, even 10 kills in this tank. So it's a lot down to the driver. I just don't like the playstyle, but It is a decent premium tank. It's not that expensive. I would recommend playing up the Japanese lines before buying this tank. As I say, this is an average tank, and there are a lot of tier 5 premium tanks that are a hell of a lot better than this one, but on the other hand, there are a lot of tier 5 premium tanks that are a hell of a lot worse than this one. If you like Japanese tanks, if you like the playstyle, I really recommend grinding up the Japanese lines, playing games in the tier 5 Chinu, and if you like that tank and if you are doing well in this tank, you will do well in the Chinokai. There is really no difference in playstyle between the two tanks. The two tanks are almost identical and they will face the same tanks on the battlefield. So if you can do well in the Chinu, or you like the Chito at tier 6, then maybe the Chinokai is for you. As I say, it's an average premium tank. There are better ones and there are worse ones, and you could do worse than spend 1500 gold on this tank. So is it worth 1500 gold? Well, I would probably wait to pick it up in a sale, but that's just me. If you like Japanese tanks, if you do well in Japanese tanks, then this tank is definitely worth 1500 gold. If you don't like playing Japanese tanks, I can't recommend the Chinokai, and if you're on the fence about it, I would recommend probably the T25 if you're looking for a tier 5 medium tank. But the Chinokai, is it worth 1500 gold? Yes. But only if you like playing Japanese tanks. If you don't, it's not a bad tank, but try and pick it up in a sale. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.